my bait. Got it back. All right, we're good. Well, that sucks. What's going on, YouTube? It's your boy, Why Not Tony, and today we're just gonna talk about stuff. Today it's super nice outside, and I really want to go fishing. So the video is probably gonna be short, sweet, to the point. I think today we're just gonna go over some like tools and materials that we use here in the shop that we use to fix cars. Just a little rundown of all the things. I don't know what to do with my hands. Just all the things that we use in the shop to do stuff. So I think we'll start with a hypothetical. It's New York State and you got a car that's got a little bit of rust on the bottom of the doors or the rocker panel, which is underneath the door sill. What do we do when we have something like that? Well, first we want to get rid of all that rust. So there's a couple of things that we use to remove that rust. First thing, if it's in a spot where we can easily grind the rust off and the rust hasn't been there for too long and it's not eaten all the way through the metal, we'll take this. It's air-powered, pneumatic-powered grinder. The pads on it are like you throw them out, get new ones, and we grind off until we can get solid, clean metal. Another thing, same thing, but smaller for smaller spots, or if you need to get into a spot a little bit tighter, we use one of these. It's the same thing. It's a pneumatic grinder, right angle, smaller discs. And if it's really bad, we'll take something like this, which is a cutting wheel, and we'll cut out the spot and completely eliminate the damaged area or the rusty area. Rust in cars is kind of like cancer. And I don't like using that terminology because cancer is a lot more serious, obviously. But if you think about it, the rust is going to keep growing past that point until a large portion is all rust, a large portion of the metal. So you really want to get rid of it before it grows and becomes something much more than just like the bottom of a door becomes a whole door, or the wheel well of a truck becomes the whole box of the truck becomes rusty. So removing that as best we can is number one priority. After we've removed the rust from the situation, we will either do another couple of things. One thing is we have random sheets of metal here. This is a thinner piece of metal. We've got thicker pieces of metal. And if we have if we have taken and removed the entire piece of metal, we'll cut a piece of metal to match and then weld it in to the new spot. Or if we have saved a decent chunk of the metal and the body panel that we are trying to replace is still intact, we'll take what we have here, which is called Marglass. It's like a fiberglass putty or paste. You can see that in there. We'll take this and we'll mix it with some cream hardener and apply it to the area to start giving it some structure, fill in those pits and dents and whatnot. And then also it's strong and it'll last a little bit longer. And then after we do that, we'll take that, put it on, and then sand it off so that it's smooth. And then we'll go over it with some bone, which is this stuff. It's a softer, easier to maneuver and weld. It's kind of like a clay. Same process though. You get a chunk of this, you put it on to something, you mix in some of that cream hardener, and it becomes hard, rock hard. It's kind of like a cement. It's called body fill or bone. It fills the body and helps add shape. On this truck, actually, I could show you. I mean, you won't be able to see. I don't have any good examples today. Another video, I'll probably go through the whole process, but that might be a 2-3 part process because this whole process to like remove rust and repair it is like a 2-3 day event in itself. And I don't think you want one whole video that long. But in this is a good example right here. This was all gone. This was all rust. And so what we had done diddly did was cut out probably around this area, and then we had welded in a piece, bent it to shape, and then we filled it with Marglass so that we could cover up where the metal had, like the metal seam was, filled it with Marglass, sanded the Marglass down, and then used the bone to get this line back into it and to get the shape good, because the metal was bent. You can't perfectly curve metal and perfectly bend it. And the Marglass is a little bit too hard to get good shapes on, so the bone helps fill that and put good shapes in. After we have put the bone and the Marglass on the vehicle, patch the area with that piece of metal or patch it with just straight Marglass, we'll go and we'll prime it. And primer, this is primer. This is acrylic primer. It's just a base model primer. Primer helps fill, so when you put the bone or the Marglass on, you'll find just little pinholes here and there, and some things might be a little bit, the lines might not be perfect. Primer helps seal everything underneath that. Primer is like a paint. It's like any other primer. If you're painting a house, you're gonna put a primer down. Painting anything, you're gonna put a primer down. This primer is a little bit thicker, and then you mix it with some paint thinner and put it in this gun, and we'll spray it on. That whole truck that I just showed you is completely primed. The entire thing of that is primed. That's a different type of prime. There's different levels of prime. You've got your thinner, more base model primes like this, which is used for just minor to medium repair work. You put the prime on, it helps seal everything down underneath it, fill what small cracks, dents, chips that are still within that bone, and helps you just get the final touches on the shape of it. Also, the paint will adhere to the primer better than the paint will adhere to anything else. So, like this big truck that we're completely repainting, primed the whole thing. There was damage basically everywhere on the truck, but even in the spots where there wasn't much damage, we're gonna prime the whole thing. Throughout this whole process, we're hitting our repair spot with different levels of grit, sanding paper, or grinding discs. So the grinding disc that we use is the highest grit we've got. It's like a 36 grit, maybe even lower, some of them we have. That's to really knock down everything off. But the finishing product after that is not smooth at all. Then we put the Marglass on, grind the Marglass down, put the bone on. We're not gonna grind the bone. We're gonna use sandpaper and a DA, or a district attorney, and we're gonna sand it down with 80 grit and then 220, and then we'll prime it, and then the prime will be hit with 320 afterwards. Knock that prime down with 320 so it's nice and smooth. You're not taking off the primer, you're just smoothing it out, making sure that everything is straight and even. And then after we do that with the primer, we're going to prep the car and get it ready for paint. Things are creaking. Anyways, this is a paint booth. It's a big, large, wide open, ventilated spot where we paint most of our vehicles. So in this paint booth, we do a couple of different things. First, we'll pull the vehicle in, obviously. Second thing we're gonna do is we're gonna tape off the outside of that vehicle where we don't want paint to be going. This paint will aerate and move around a lot, so if you don't cover up the spots you don't want it, you're gonna get overspray. And what overspray is just the paint that's in the air settling on the car, and then it leaves a rough and hazy surface on where you don't want. So what we do is we take this, which is a paper tree, or what we call a paper tree. It's basically just a roll of paper that has tape on one side. We'll pull a piece off to length, put it on, and then tape off wherever we need to. And then when we finish that, we'll take this plastic and cover up the rest of the vehicle. If we're painting the whole of the vehicle, then we're just taping off the pieces that aren't getting painted, like the front grille, bumper, or whatnot. And this plastic, don't worry, this plastic is Corona treated, so we're safe here. And we'll make sure that's all taped down and nice so paint can't get up underneath the plastic or the paper. Then we're going to dump a whole bunch of water on this floor. It helps keep the dust down because the paint gun shoots out a lot of air. And if we're low to the ground, it's gonna kick up some dust that's on the ground. So we put water down to stop dust from coming up. Even if we sweep this place a whole lot, it's a very old shop and the concrete floor is very, very old. Dust just is everywhere. So we'll wet everything down. Now, final prep on the car itself. We're gonna take this, it is called surface cleaner. And this is the final thing that you're gonna put on the car before paint starts to touch. It's like a heavy duty degreaser, and it just removes a whole bunch of stuff like fingerprints that are on where you've touched it. It's gonna remove all that stuff. You put it on wet and you wipe it off dry. And then after that, we use this, it's called a tack rag. It's just gonna get off any little bit of lint. This is like right before, like 5 seconds before you're painting. You take this rag, it's very sticky. It's not very sticky, but it's got a sticky substance on it that's not gonna stay on the car. And it's just gonna collect the lint or dust or whatever fibers came off the rag we used to wash it. If anything was in the air and it settles on the car, it's gonna take all that off. Then we go ahead and get our paint, which we're obviously gonna match to the coat of the car. You can see this is a 2013 Dodge paint color, and it's called PDM or GDM, depending on, or CDM, excuse me, depending on what's going on. We get a lot of our paint from Napa or another shop that has a paint mixing facility. Most of the time it's pretty close. It is kind of difficult to get the exact specifications, but if we have to, we'll make it work. We'll take that paint, and if it's concentrated paint, we'll mix some thinner in it. That's what this bottle is. Thin it, it's like a 4-to-1 ratio or something. It says on this. No, it doesn't. It's like a 4-to-1 ratio depending on how thick you want the paint to be. Sometimes it's just a straight single color paint job where it's just one can of paint. Other times it's a tri-coat, which is a base color, a middle layer, and then the clear coat, which will have some pearls in it or something, and you have to layer those paints on top of each other while they're still wet to make a surface that's nice and appealing. After you get the paint on, whether it's a tri-coat or a single stage coat, you're gonna want to clear it because the paint will dry flat colored and it won't be shiny like most cars are. So also the clear coat is gonna help protect the paint from just, weather and whatnot. So the clear coat is this right here. This is clear coat. This is concentrated clear coat. And this, again, you're gonna have to mix with a hardener, kind of like the Bone or Marglass. But the hardener is this. There's different levels of hardener. If you want it to dry fast, use a fast hardener. There's a medium hardener. It depends on your temperature range that you're working with and humidity levels and all that stuff. You want it to be, I think it's around like 75 to 80 degrees in the paint booth when you're painting, and you want the humidity level to be low, but you don't want it to be dry. You don't want it to be very dry. So you mix those together. This is a 4-to-1 ratio, I know for a fact. And then you put that on. You're doing multiple layers or multiple coats of color and of clear coat until you get where you want to. After the car has fully dried and sealed, we're going to remove the papers, remove the plastic, and put back together whatever we have taken apart. And then if there's any imperfections in the paint, we're going to take a super fine grit wet sanding piece of paper, anywhere from 1,000 grit to 2,000, 3,000 grit, and we're going to use water with that, and we're going to sand out those imperfections. And then we'll take a buffer, which we don't have any here because we've been working at the lake working on boats, but we're going to take a buffer, which is a big rotating fluffy pad, and you use different types of compounds, and it helps bring the shine back because when you sand it, it's going to dull it back out. When you're wet sanding, you're not going to go through the clear coat. I mean, you can, it's definitely possible, but you can't go through, you don't want to go through the clear coat. If you do go through the clear coat, we're going to have to Scotch-Brite and sand down the whole car again and repaint it, at least in that part that was damaged. So we'll take that buffer, and there's different levels of compound. There's high grit compound and low grit compound, and then there's polishes. And we'll use a variation of those to bring the color back, bring the shine back, and get rid of that imperfection. Some imperfections we run into is the clear coat will run because this shop is cold. And so when you spray the clear coat on, sometimes it'll sag a little bit before it can fully dry, or it'll run a little bit. So you get little drops or something that looks like water had run down it. We'll sand those out with some wet sandpaper and then buff them out, and they're usually gone. Other things are in the gun. Sometimes chunks of something will get in the gun, or just dust particles in general will fly around and get caught underneath the first or second layer of clear coat. But sanding them out and then polishing it will make it look good. And then that's basically it. In this shop, after we get the work that is done on the vehicle done, we'll always go through and do a quick detail, especially if we were working in a door or something and the doors were open on the vehicle. We're gonna get dust and whatnot in there. So we'll go through and we'll vacuum, detail, and then wash the exterior of the car. This process is basically the same for rust work or any other type of body damage. So if you get into a fender bender, we're going to be doing the same thing, only on metal pieces. Plastic bumper covers there's different processes to do it. If we're just going to straight up and replace the piece with either new or used piece of metal, so if we need a new fender, or if the fender's too far gone and we're just going to replace it, we're going to obviously skip the bone and marglassing phase, and we'll just prep it for paint and then paint it to match the car color, and then either put it on or whatever we got to do. Other things that we do in this shop are just, like I said, replace body panels, interior work, wiring work, minor mechanical issues. We're not really set up for mechanical work. I mean, here we are working on an engine in a boat, but we'll do what we can, and if we can't do it, we've got other shops that are better equipped for different things. I've done anything from transmission work, brake work, oil changes, the basics, to full-on painting of vehicles. So we are a body shop, which is like the plastic surgery of the medical world. We're just gonna make you or your car look better, but we're still doctors, so if we needed to, we could try to save your life. That's kind of how I boil it down when people ask what's the difference between a body man and a normal mechanic or a general mechanic. I have the basic tools, or I should say, have the basic tools to fix most anything. I mean, earlier this week we replaced a clutch fan, and those are specialized tools. For the most part, there's ways to do it without specialized tools, but yeah. So that's gonna be today's video. I really, really wanna go fishing. It's stupid nice outside. All right, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of guy who messes around with bone. Stupid. Subscribe if you enjoyed. I hope this video isn't 3 hours long. I don't know how it could be 3 hours long. I feel like I only talked for 5 minutes. But yeah, hopefully at some point I'll be able to make videos running down each step of the process. At some point I want to paint the top of that Jag, the roof. It's very embarrassing and I hate it. So we're gonna go through that whole process. That is not gonna be much, there's no rust on it, so it's just gonna be a sanding and prepping, basically. But we're gonna have to do a large portion of what I talked about today on that car. So that'll be one video where I can explain more in depth and show you the process and how I mix things. Yeah, all right, like I said before, hope you enjoyed. Go outside today because it's real nice, except for this video probably won't be up until tomorrow morning because that's just the way things work. And yeah, bye.